Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for tuning in to today's conversation about local procurement. Many of us on the call are already passionate advocates for the cause of the local and regional economy. And we know well that major organisations across our city, our county and our region are fundamentally important to the local supply chain, and that the opportunities for smaller businesses in our region are huge in terms of selling into some of those major organisations that have huge public sector spend. And we want to keep as much of that spending here within our local and regional economy as possible. And we always say procurement is one of those things where everybody seems to be on the same side. No one argues really with the idea that we should source more from local businesses. Everyone talks the talk in terms of making those opportunities available to smaller companies and working hard to open up those opportunities that are available within major buyers. So it's one of those things where we're sort of all on the same side, and yet consistently it continues to not always happen the way we'd like it to, and we know that many contracts still go to suppliers and providers outside of the region, and there are lots of different reasons for that, some of which we think are easy to solve and some of which are more difficult to solve. And some of those are kind of attitude shifts or increasing our skills or awareness of who's around, and other things are kind of more intractable and more challenging to solve, like where there are real gaps that we don't make things locally or we don't do things locally, and a sort of aversion to risk and how we manage that risk within larger purchasers, larger organisations. So we've been working with Swansea Council over the last 9 months on a project funded by the UK government's Community Renewal Fund. And the idea was to connect major buyers in Swansea with some of the fantastic local businesses that are really crying out for work and opportunities from those buyers, and to really understand what are some of the low-hanging fruit within larger organisations that we all know could be sourced locally, and to try and make those connections and open up those opportunities. And we've been tackling this in a wide range of different ways. I'm going to hand over just for a moment and put Julie on the spot, but Julie has been working with us throughout this time, and many of you know Julie Jones, who is incredibly passionate about the cause of SMEs and the opportunities for local sourcing. So Julie, I'd love to give you the opportunity just to say hello and a little bit about the work that you've been doing with us over the last few months.
Hi everybody, good afternoon. Yes, I've been working with For the Region best part of this year really on looking at procurement, which is such a huge issue across the board for big companies and small companies, micro companies and sole traders all starting out. I think what really took me by surprise was the enormity of the task, but the challenge really was to find local, larger purchasers who would perhaps redirect their attention to purchase from local suppliers, and in the doing of that I scurried about to various offices and online meetings and various different places and found actually I was very pleasantly surprised by the amount of local sourcing and purchasing that's actually going on already. So it was a case of me looking at the gaps with these large purchasers to see, you know, where a small local provider perhaps could supply perhaps stationery or cleaning or coffee even, for an example. And we had some absolute heroes who have really put their shoulder to the wheel, and I have to give a shout out to Coastal Housing, who have done fantastic work locally, and they've really grasped the nettle in as much as buying uniforms locally, which would have gone elsewhere, coffee, even getting sandwiches in for staff and staff drinks from tiny little local suppliers who perhaps wouldn't even get, I mean, you wouldn't have a procurement exercise for coffee for your staff, but they've actually embraced the local economy near their offices and use micro businesses for different things. And so it's been about trying to encourage on the micro scale. It's been about trying to encourage larger organizations to purchase from smaller, not necessarily one-man bands, but smaller and micro concerns as well. And it's taken me in the most diverse directions, and I really feel that the measurement of the success of the project is going to be one of legacy, because there is clearly an undercurrent and a very good intent towards the local sourcing and local markets, which simply wasn't there before. You know, everybody that we've challenged with this particular project has sent in sheets showing where they buy stationery, where they buy uniform, where they buy coffee, sandwiches, cakes, bread, whatever, cleaning services, printing, stationery, and they've just been going to Amazon. Other major billionaire companies are available, and they've just been purchasing for ease, really, and not seeing the wider picture, not seeing the bigger picture of how fundamental it is to the local economy that the larger organisations purchase from the smaller ones. I mean, that's the proper trickle down in the economy. If you are successful, then, you know, give a hand up to other people who are coming along behind you, other services, other providers. So it's been amazing. I've driven Dawn and Zoe nuts on occasion, coming back with very obtuse and diverse ideas and reasons. It's been a mass germination of ideas, and it's been a joy. It's been a real joy. So thank you both, and thank you all, because I've probably nagged you at some point.
Yeah, we talk a lot about pester power, and Julie, you've got pester power, which is so important on these things, and getting that you know, the agenda of local sourcing on everyone's minds, and holding some of these partners and partner organisations accountable for where different things come from. And I think that's a really important role, and one that we hope to continue to serve as an organisation, to shine a light where good things are happening and to ask the questions where good things are not happening. So yes, thank you, Julie, so much for your contributions to the project, and for that little recap of the priorities, really. And I think what really comes through in what you've said there is, you know, what a game changer it can be for a micro business to win a contract with a major buyer. And certainly we've had some really lovely stories as we've gone through, of small companies who, you know, a contract for £1,000 makes a big difference to a tiny business, and a regular purchase every month makes a big difference to a micro business. And I know from my own journey as a business owner that winning contracts with a few major organisations in our local area really helped us then to go on and sell our services to local authorities and housing associations elsewhere across the UK, because you had that track record to say that you had worked with major public organisations. And as a small business, that is a real stamp of credibility. So I think it's a really important role that major organisations can play in supporting the success of small businesses, giving them that vote of confidence that can then enable those companies to go on and flourish in wider markets as well. So fascinating journey we've been on, and we're really delighted to have some real thought leaders and activists on all of this in the room, one of whom is Thomas Cadwallader from Pobble. And Tom, I know that you also sit on the board of the Wales Procurement Alliance, which is an interesting organisation in itself. But let's talk first of all about Pobble, and how high is local sourcing on your agenda, and what are some of the good things that are happening at Pobble to make sure that the local economy benefits from all your spending?
Afternoon, everybody. Basically, we've got an agenda within our sort of procurement strategy to buy as locally as we possibly can, and trying to keep the pound in Wales wherever possible. A majority of our contracts and tenders that we undertake are lotted into sort of geographical areas. I don't know how much you know about Pobl, but Pobl goes from sort of as far west Wales as you can go, up to and including sort of Monmouthshire, Newport way. So working with sort of the larger contractors, as we've done in the past, potentially has caused issues around sort of the service being provided. And I think in some cases, as big as Pobl are, we are just a number sometimes on somebody's order book. Whereas when we engage with the local contractors and the smaller suppliers, we are actually sort of their main sort of source of income in some areas. We've literally just awarded a £500 million framework for development and construction, and of the 17 contractors, there was 18, obviously Jay, who's just gone. Of the 17 remaining contractors, 15 of them are Welsh. So there's a huge amount of work which will be going through that framework over the next sort of 3 to 4 years, which will hopefully the pound will stay in Wales. And that's just one of many. You know, there's a company on the call today who we've worked with closely over the last 3 years, who've been, you know, fantastic in providing the service for Pobl. Again, a local company, relatively small company to start with, without sounding disrespectful, but have grown significantly in that time period, and are continuing to sort of provide an excellent service with goods and services. So I think, you know, I think it's important to try and ensure we try and keep the pound in Wales. I'm not adverse to appointing contractors outside Wales if the cost and services are more competitive or of a better nature, but a majority of our spend, which goes through procurement, we are running with about 80 to 85%, which is Welsh pound, which is relatively high when we look at some of the sort of the contracts that we implement. Significant contracts along sort of windows and doors, for example. You know, we're spending £2 million a year on windows and doors. All that is in Wales. We're currently working with our windows and doors contractor to try and sort of embed them into sort of tenders for construction and development. So it's not only then that the contractor is building the homes for us, but also using our supply chain and our contracts to install doors and windows. Obviously, the benefits from that, just not from a cost perspective, but also from a maintenance perspective, in that we've got maintenance, they do the doors and windows repairs and maintenance for us. So effectively, if there's older properties which have had new doors and windows as part of a planned program, or reactive work on new properties, it's one of the same contractor. Additionally, you know, from a sustainability point of view, we haven't got 2 or 3 different companies turning up to one site to do multiple works. So we're also trying to reduce our carbon. So doing a tender today in comparison to doing a tender 10 years ago, it's not just about the cost any longer. It's about obviously the quality of the product and the service that we're procuring, trying to keep the pound in Wales as much as we possibly can, and also trying to achieve net carbon zero, whilst also trying to achieve sort of social value, community benefits, and apprenticeships. So it's a tough act to sort of balance out to get what we need, but we're winning. We put it that we're winning at this moment in time. But yeah. I'm all for keeping the pound in Wales.
It's great to hear some of that, and the kind of proactive approach. And I wonder, I think I'm right in saying that you can't write it into your tender documentation that you want your suppliers to be based in Wales. So what's some of the advice for both sides of the coin there, for the buyer and for the SME? You know, how can you set up tenders in a way that does support local businesses?
So everything we tender goes out on sell to Wales in the first instance. 95% of the contracts we do are over the ODU values. We tend to split everything down into geographical areas, sometimes even further. So you've got a lot for east and a lot for west, but then sometimes you've got a lot within a lot to reduce it even smaller to attract the local contractor. In addition to that, what we've done, and I'm in the middle of a tender at this moment in time, so we've split it east and west, and we've stipulated in the tender documents that you can only bid for one of the two lots. Now, by doing that, you're effectively the bigger companies are planning on sort of bidding for a contract which is worth millions of pounds, but it's split into two lots, and they can only bid for one of the two lots. Suggest to them that it's not worthwhile for them bidding. And I think, you know, obviously continuing to sort of reduce the spend which goes outside Wales is a challenge. It's a challenge that where we can work on slicing and dicing tenders up to sort of undertake that. And I'm doing another one which is in relation to some funding we've had where it falls below the ODU value, which has allowed me to non-advertise but invite contractors to bid, and we've only invited Welsh contractors to bid, which is a fair chunk of work as well. So we want to take a lot of the smaller local SME contractors on the journey with us a little bit. We want to sort of embrace it, and also I think if you've got Pobl on their CVs and their etc., largest housing association in Wales, then it sings a lot of volumes or speaks a lot of volumes when they're bidding for other contracts in Wales.
Yeah, absolutely, and I can certainly vouch for that that credibility that you get from working with an organisation like Pobl. Yeah, it's great to hear all that, Thomas, and we might come back and talk a little bit about the Wales Procurement Alliance, because what has become evident to us through the course of this project is that whilst many tenders are published on Sell to Wales, some tenders are also kind of procured through less transparent mechanisms and existing frameworks that local suppliers actually don't hear about that often. So we wonder whether there is an opportunity for more local suppliers to connect with organisations like the Wales Procurement Alliance, and whether you think that those opportunities need to be better advertised or better amplified, or whether you think that smaller businesses are losing out when organisations choose existing major national frameworks instead of doing their procurement in-house.
I also, in addition to the WPA, I also sit on the PFH board as well, which is the Procurement for Housing Board, as an advisory member in sort of tendering. Over the last sort of 18 months with those, Mike Owen who used to be in Merthyr Valley Homes also sits on there with me, but we've sort of banged the drum about Welsh suppliers being on procurement for housing frameworks, and what we're looking at is bringing in some sort of advisors to reach out to Welsh sort of bid contractors and sort of bring them onto the process. A lot of these frameworks, which are set up by consortiums, are quite rigid in that the amount of questions and the quality aspect of it can be quite sort of alarming for small contractors. And the opening a tender and seeing 15 questions on quality, you want to know everything about your company and everything you've done in the past, and some don't have the experience to provide that, and then fall quite short. From a Pobl, just briefly, on a Pobl perspective, I think that when we do tendering, we try and reduce the quality questions or keep them as simple as we possibly can, because we understand that obviously some of the larger companies who bid for work with us have got bid writers who do this on a day-to-day basis, whereas some bids we receive are from sort of, I don't know, an MD in some circumstances who are writing the bid. we try to simplify it as much as we possibly can with maybe 3 or 4 questions about the tender or the contract itself, and maybe 1 or 2 on social value. And it's looking about their experiences, their past experience, and how they could implement this contract going forward. So I think that's always important, to try and keep it simple. And obviously we were using Squid, but now that's switched to SPD, which is the supplier questionnaire, if you like. That's quite straightforward as well. So there's different ways to sort of get where you need to get to to award a contract. I'm not a massive fan of frameworks, if I'm totally honest. We tend to do a lot of our own contracts. We do use framework for, say, maybe some of your everyday run-of-the-mill stuff, such as maybe stationery on paper, for example. We tend to use the WPA frameworks for things like asbestos things, but I think those companies which are appointed to that consortium or that framework are Welsh as well. And then the MPS as well. So yeah, I think frameworks is great, but we'll come back to that if you want to talk about WPA.
Yeah, there's loads to unpack there. Thank you for that. And you mentioned, you didn't mention them by name, but you mentioned ADS while you were speaking as one of your local suppliers. And I know ADS is on the call today, and hopefully, Anthony, you'll be able to tell us a little bit about your experience of winning work with Pobble, and I suppose the difference that has made to your business, and yeah, talk a little bit about the story of your journey in selling into Pobble.
Hello everybody, I'm Anthony. I'm the Director of Operations here for Andrew Dowry Solutions Limited. Thankfully, it's not my business, it's my little brother's, so I have a massive vested interest in there. Andrew brought me into the company about 5.5, 6 years ago from my past life. Wanted to grow the business, and so straight away he put me in and decided to put me in a couple of courses with the Sell to Wales and the Business Wales up in Bridgend, and through that development and writing smaller tenders for Swansea Council, maybe for a plant room in a school to do mechanical works and some other areas, we started developing our sort of our procurement writing or tendering writing processes, and we were requested to go and do some work because we do some sponsorship, some social value with a couple of the football teams. We were then requested to come and support and just do a little bit of pack testing, as it happens, for Pobble, because they were areas that start as they merged with all those different companies. They started to look for local business, small local businesses. And we started on our journey then with Pobble on pack testing. Tom alluded to contracts being split in two. And just under 2 years ago, we were successful in winning both East and West electrical contract for Pobble. Prior to that, and as we were in, we sort of demonstrated our eagerness, our drive, our quality, as Tom has already alluded to, and the ability to get the job done. And we're based in Swansea. We're very, very local. All our guys and girls are all from the local area as well, and the outskirts of Swansea, but moving towards the east, up towards Newport, Cwmbran area. So we were able then to mobilise both East and West and put more employment within the company. As Tom said, yeah, we were fairly small. There was probably about 20 of us. Doing mechanical works, installing for Nest or British Gas. Nest is an offshoot of British Gas, and from there we're now standing at about 85 personnel within 2.5 years. So the growth is absolutely phenomenal, and where we struggle a little bit is probably our commercial knowledge, because having grown that fast, that quick, so Andrew, our MD, calls in on all his friends and colleagues in amongst the sort of the guys and girls that have been much more established over the years, and comes in with different ideas on how to work the business. We are continually tendering all of the time, and I spend most of my time. I've taken a couple of hours off because I'm in the middle of a tender at present, just to make sure, because I didn't want to miss this. This is my first session of this sort. So, but going on from the local side of it, when we were saying local, our IT developers who we've just engaged with the past couple of months are from Gosainen. They're local. Our phone lines are from Pontardawe, a company in Pontardawe. They're local. Our clothing is from Llangaverach Road in Swansea. A one-man, I would say, a two-person band, husband and wife, and they supply all our clothing. We do use a plethora of companies for suppliers. For instance, we've just won a contract down west. LBS Llandilo Building Services, a local company. They're expanding down west with a contract that we've just done or just won with ATEB, bathrooms and kitchens. We are utilising them. So yes, we've got the national companies, but we're also using our local companies as well, even the smaller ones such as Plum Point or Lichfield Bathrooms. Those type of companies, which have been absolutely fantastic, and we just keep on growing. And as we grow, we buy more materials off them. They then grow, they then expand. So it's a big old snowballing scenario. So it's things are on the up.
That sounds absolutely amazing and really brilliant to hear. So thank you for sharing the story. That's fantastic growth. As you say, massive increase in employment. So that's job opportunities for people living locally. And then the ripple effect, the knock-on snowball effect, as you describe it, of when we're doing well as a business, we can buy more from local suppliers ourselves and really help to pass on the benefit of these major public contracts. So really great. Thank you for joining the call, and really great to hear about that journey that your business has been on. And a few things strike me with that. Firstly, once you get to a certain scale that you can devote somebody to writing tenders day in, day out, and also the learning curve that I guess you've been on with that. I think you talked about starting small with small opportunities, and then we've all been there, but trying to hone your skills in terms of what to say and what works. So I guess you feel like you've learned a lot from your failures as well as your successes on that front.
Yeah, definitely. And what I would say, even if we are successful in a tender, I always ask for feedback from the panel, that the procurement team, because that will develop for other areas then within, because it goes in a grading system. That there's always room for improvement all of the time. So, and that's the way we work here, is develop.
Brilliant. Well, it's great to hear that story, Anthony. Thank you for sharing. And Anthony mentioned there some resources, and I know there are courses and training available through Business Wales and other avenues to get to grips with platforms like Sell to Wales. And while it wears a little thin, always being told as a small supplier that we've got to up our skills and get ourselves on Sell to Wales and make sure we're leveraging the opportunities that arise on there. I think from what Anthony has said, it really works for some businesses, and that's really, really great to hear. We'll move on now, because we have got the DVLA in the room with us as well today. And of course, DVLA as a huge organisation operating nationally but based here in Swansea has a really potentially massive beneficial role to play in our local economy. And we've got Charlotte here, who is working on increasing local spending and social value at the DVLA. So Charlotte, can you talk to us a little bit about what's happening in DVLA to promote local sourcing and to make sure that as much of your spending as possible stays in our local economy?
We find ourselves in quite a different position to kind of the stories we've just heard, because similarly, like Paul, because DVLA is an executive agency of central government,
Charlotte, you might want to turn your camera off. We've lost your sound.
Oh, sorry, Charlotte,
Can
we
you
lost
still
you
hear me?
there.
As I was going to say,
can-
I'm not sure if you can still hear me. Where did I get cut off?
right at the beginning, I think.
No, no. I'll come on camera
We
just in
missed all
case.
of it. Turn your camera off and let's see if we can get the audio.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah,
can everyone hear
start
me?
again. Yes.
So, as I was saying, we are an executive agency of central governments. We find ourselves in quite a different position. And I think quite a few conversations with Julie about this, about kind of my internal frustration about it. So, procurement make. So we services for frameworks. Frozen again.
Yeah, I think it's not
I think
working.
I'm freezing. No, I'm sorry, everybody.
Oh, no, sorry to miss out on your what you're saying there, and I think it's a challenge. DVLA can't use Zoom, so I know you're on your phone. So
It is. It's yeah. Oh God, why isn't this working?
yeah, it's a little bit in and out for us there.
Probably what I'm happy to kind of put something, perhaps an email to the group. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yeah, that would be.
Or Charlotte, maybe you and I can have a little bit of time on Teams, and I can record that, and then we can.
Yeah, perhaps that would be better. Yeah, that's a good idea, Zoe. Yeah,
and
let's do that.
We can feed that into this
Sure.
conversation.
There we
Is
are.
that
Perfect.
okay?
Yeah, happy to do that. Yeah.
Smashing.
All right,
Thanks, Charlotte.
brilliant.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Thank you. No, that's great. So I'd like to come to Peter Lynn next. Peter, you're a massive advocate for the local economy and local sourcing. What have you heard there from Pobble, from ADS? And yeah, what questions have you got? Or do you see that those sorts of approaches are making a real difference to small businesses across Swansea?
Yes, they can. It hasn't been a lot of positive experience for me, actually, talk about national frameworks, which Tom was there. I had quite a bad experience with that, to be honest. And most of my business, to those who know me, I'm a lawyer, commercial lawyer, so we deal with an awful lot of local business. Started 23 years ago, my own business with just 3 commercial lawyers. And we've grown now to 80 odd staff. And by staying local and massively championing localism, one thing I would say to everybody, and I say it all the time, is follow your money. Where are you spending your money? And that can be even on a personal level. And if you're not spending it locally, why? It has to be a very good reason. It shouldn't just be the price, to be honest. I can give business to national, international, national firms. They're never going to use me. It'll never come back. So if you use, as Anthony said earlier, if you're using your local IT company, telecoms company, and I can just go on and on, it's all come back in spades to me. And as they've grown, I've grown. So it's not, it seems so obvious to me that we should, the only way that we as a local region, I mean very local, I'm talking Swansea and Swansea Bay probably, I champion that, although I do have offices elsewhere. Swansea Bay is pretty much where I am at. It is, for me, all about following your money, and I'm talking about the private sector, where you have much simpler, basically, as somebody got a good reputation, you try them out, you work. There's no tendering processes involved, and that's how I've built most of my work. I have gone to national frameworks. I've spent an awful lot of money getting onto a national framework for local authorities, only to sit there seeing that there were 3 firms in Wales and 2 from England, and I didn't get a single contract over the entire period, and there wasn't even anything put to tender over that period. I think I went for 1 tender in Cardiff, didn't get it. And it's a bit annoying when you see local authorities and major institutions such as the universities, etc. For example, Swansea Council and Swansea Universities historically always using Cardiff firms for their professional services. And I just don't understand it. I don't understand why that's, and it's not even an opportunity being given to anybody else. So I'm happy to have that conversation with anyone at any time. And I've almost rejected it. I rejected the point. I've spent an awful lot of money paying people like Anthony, who does it brilliantly, no doubt, for ADS, paying an awful lot of people to put the tenders in, knowing that's never going to go anywhere because there's a personal relationship and they're not obliged to use the framework anyway. So it's very much should be the case of building up your own reputation from doing good work, and then selling off the back of that, and selling in a variety of ways. It's lovely to see Tasha. She'll tell me a million ways of how I could be selling it better, no doubt. But you've got to use your localism to me. And if I give some examples of how things come back, and it's about saying yes to local people, whatever that small thing is. Yes, we've talked about coffee, cleaning, all of that. But what about the charity events? What about the, you know, I'm very passionate about sport and theatre and events. If we keep saying no, then the event doesn't happen locally. If you say yes, make it work. Make it then work for you. There's a commercial return. So I just like to see a general positivism, really. It's lovely to hear from Tom and others that they are making it simpler for local suppliers. Unfortunately, the tendering process will put an awful lot of people off. So where you can try people out, and I suspect that's what happened with ADS, they would try it out first. And then if they give a good service, then feel free to use them. I know you might be hamstring, and we didn't quite hear from the DVLA the strings that they've got, but no doubt there are. But we've got to overcome these barriers. If there's a good local supplier of whatever it is, then there shouldn't be a barrier to using them. As I say, but if everyone we meet, if everyone just follows their money, follow where you're spending your money, and if you're not spending it locally, then the likelihood is that national company that you're spending it with. I don't think Amazon are going to use me, so I try not to use Amazon that much. My wife does, but I can't stop her for that. But Amazon are very unlikely to phone me up and use me. Whereas if I use a local clothier, and we've mentioned clothier, they're lovely guys working very hard, small family businesses who do a really, really good job, a really good service. And you'd be surprised how much they can scale up. And that's the other thing. We've got to make them better. I was really encouraged by Tom talking about how he's works with the suppliers to make them better, and that's what we've got to do. I remember a quick example. We didn't. I used to be very annoyed that I couldn't get a barrister locally who would do commercial work. They had the skills, but they didn't really want to do it. So I had to go to very often to London. But gradually, I worked with a local bar, and we were able to get people who could do it. And in fact, one of them is now a judge. He was doing a very, very little work, actually. So I'm very pleased on a very small micro level. I was encouraging them to widen their network of work, widen what they could do, try them out, improve them, and eventually they fly. So if there isn't the expert in your region, make it happen. If you haven't got a supplier in your region, use a supplier who's close to it and make them better if you can. So I built, that's what I've built my business on, really, and we've been relatively successful. As I say, going from 2.5 lawyers to 40 odd lawyers and 80 odd staff, all in Swansea. And I'm more proud of the fact of the businesses that I dragged along the way. When I was my telecom provider is one of the biggest telecom providers now in the region, but I was his biggest client at the time when I had 2 offices, small offices, and he says that to me. He's a multi-millionaire. But I didn't make him that multi-millionaire, but I was part of it. I was part of that process by giving him the contract. I could have gone to Cardiff. There were Cardiff suppliers who wanted to supply my telecoms. I didn't. I used a local guy. So I could talk about this forever. I'm afraid I'm a massive advocate for localism. And I just asked the bigger, I mean, again, even something as big as a Premier League football team, put their legal services to tender. They made it very simple. It was basically an interview process, and we won it. If it was very simple, come in, show us what you do, had a good track record in commercial law. And I know the big boys in Cardiff and London were appalled that a Premier League football club were using Peter Lynn and Partners, but it worked, and it worked very well, and it's still working. But I wouldn't have got that if I hadn't invested as well, I think, in what they were doing prior to this. And that was my big selling point. I asked them, how many of these other big legal firms are actually already sponsoring you? None. So sometimes you've got to give and support locally, and then you've got the leverage to say, well, actually, I've been supporting you for many years. Why don't you try me out? And if you're only chasing the money, if it's only a one-way street, it's not really going to work. And anyone who does networking knows that. So it's about giving first, supporting locally, and then it does come back. I'll make it work.
Really great insights there, Peter. Thank you so much for that. I think you've talked a lot about the kind of reciprocity. Oh, I managed to say the word. About it, and it works both ways. Give before you get, but also when you do work with local suppliers, they might use you, and you can grow together. And I loved what you were saying about helping those local suppliers to provide what you want, because I think sometimes small businesses actually don't know what the customer wants, or don't know where they're missing out, realizing that we're using suppliers from elsewhere because they do something. There's a certain thing that they do that the local supplier isn't currently offering but could offer if we get into dialogue and we, you know, provide those opportunities for local suppliers to grow into the roles that we need them to deliver. So really great insights there. So I'd love to come to Natasha next, because Rethink is a PR agency locally and working with a lot of major buyers in the area, but that has obviously taken some time and some dedication to grow that client base. So Natasha, share your perspective on all of this and a little bit about your business journey.
Okay, thanks, Dawn. So I'm Natasha from Rethink PR and Marketing. We've been in Swansea since 1998. So our journey is it's mixed. So we've got lots of private sector clients, of course, but we have had some good successes with public sector frameworks, most notably Welsh Government. We sat on the Welsh Government framework for about 15 years, and that allowed us then to get the experience on some big name campaigns that then allowed us to grow, as has been mentioned. I very much, I think it was Peter who said it's the give a try approach. Obviously, where, you know, I don't know, I've lost count of how many tenders I've done in my lifetime, and you know, we certainly do it. But one of our biggest success stories lately has been our work with Neath Port Talbot Council, and that was very much on a give us a try basis, so to speak, and that's just grown now that we work on lots of smaller projects for them, which they can procure very easily through us, and it works really well.
And what about your business and who you buy from? And are you walking the walk?
Yeah, you know, very much so. We get, you know, we're an office of 12, so we're not massive, but we're based in the city centre. We, you know, as individuals, we keep the local food outlets going every day. But no, we buy all our you know, our day-to-day things, our tea, coffee, milk. We buy them from the local stores. But in terms of suppliers, we use local printing companies, local, you know, our printing companies based in Bryn Mill. Our other marketing materials, unless it's something we absolutely cannot get locally, they are always procured within Swansea or Swansea Bay. We make an effort to do that. Yeah, definitely.
Great. Thanks, Natasha, for talking about your experiences quite honestly there, and unpicking a few interesting challenges. I was really interested to hear, you know, the challenge of having to give away your creative work before you've won the job, which doesn't sound fair at all. And some of the hoops we have to jump through, and the hoops we have to jump through to win those major contracts don't always seem fair on smaller suppliers, whereas larger companies perhaps have the resources to throw a whole load of creative development work at a speculative opportunity. So that feels like the game is kind of rigged against you when those big asks are made. Yeah, we have another small local company in the room, Matthews Shredding, and Nick is joining the call. What's your perspective on some of this, Nick? Positive and negative?
Yeah, very much so. I want to push on what Tom said from before, but it's nice to hear that tenders are being split down, because we operate at the very bottom of what can very often be a very large waste tender. And we can't go in for all the large waste. We would have to go in just for the confidential shredding. And very often they won't split it down. So it's promising and pleasing to hear that tenders are being broken down, and even further into geographic centres. We're based in Swansea, cover all of South Wales, but sometimes you can't compete in the east where the big boys are sitting in Philly. They've got Cardiff covered, and there's costs you can't ignore. Tendering is a very frustrating process. Most people find that. I've often found it's a race to the bottom on price, with very little thought given to anything other than price. But I also want to endorse fully what Peter Lynn said, in that you follow the money and you buy locally. All our vehicles are purchased locally. All the IT, where possible, is purchased locally. The vehicle wrap is local. The printing is local. The uniform is local. And we're finding the more we use local companies, the more they use you, and they spread the word organically themselves. Because, for example, the people that make this shirt, based just up the road from me in Pontardawe, they're just up the valley, and they will give your name to somebody else, and before you know it, you're working like that. So for somebody like me who isn't a natural networker, that's a wonderful way of working, because it's organic and it grows itself from word of mouth. There isn't a better endorsement than somebody completely unconnected with your business going, try them, they'll give you a good deal, you know. I will keep it brief, but I will finish like this. We have literally in the last week, Friday, we were given notice of a potential contract, and we won it yesterday. It's local, as in it's in East Talbot, but I couldn't get in the door there. The company that's using us is based somewhere in England, and their ethos is to source locally. I couldn't get into this East Talbot organisation. I'm not going to name them. There's no interest in that. I couldn't get near them. Couldn't even get the person to speak to. And a company from England has won the entire contract and used us because they want to source locally, which I find baffling, odd, but ultimately satisfying. So just a little story for you that I can't name names for obvious reasons, but it's a peculiar world. It really is. But we all know, everybody in this room knows that we need to support one another as much as we can, because that's where the business is. And I'll leave it with that.
Interesting, Nick. I thought that was going to be a good news story, then it turned into a bad news story, and then somewhere in between. But that's I think an experience that's common to a lot of SMEs, the frustration when you see these contracts going to, I mean, in construction they talk about tier 1 contractors, don't they? And it's often the case that the tier 1 contractors are not local, and then the idea is that perhaps they will then source locally, subcontract locally, and I suppose it's great, better that than not, but it's a shame you can't get in the door and start building a relationship with local buyers and not have to be subcontracted through an English firm.
Our hope is that by being inside, we then build a relationship, and that to use the word organic again, that again builds and builds, and you prove your worth and prove yourself while you're in there, and that very often works for us.
Yeah, interesting lessons from all the businesses in the room today. Julie, what have we heard, and what are your thoughts on today's conversation? And then I'll come to you, Tom, for a few closing thoughts from Pobble's perspective. Julie.
Thanks. Knowing Nick, having used the services of Matthew's confidential waste shredding for many years now, I can highly recommend him to anybody in the room. Yes, and he has even dealt with some difficult staff for me. That is a joke, actually. They will shred anything. So yeah, thanks. And I'm really pleased, Nick. The thing to bear in mind there is okay, it's not ideal that you've had to subcontract, but you've got a foot in the door, but also you've got a really, really useful opportunity to use that connection in whatever you go forward and tender for, you know. So it is a feather in your cap, really. And sometimes you have to take the smaller morsel in order, you know, it's a sprat to catch a mackerel, really. But you know, you've got your foot in the door. I no doubt that you provide them with a fantastic service, and then, you know, the world's your oyster, really, in terms of taking it forward and really publishing the fact that you've done a great job for this big organization. So just to, you know, sort of rounding up from me with regards to what Peter was saying, always follow your money, because at the end of the day, you get so much more money, you get so much more value out of spending locally. You know, if you buy from a big organization, fine, fair enough. But if you buy from a local small organization, you're actually helping people to put food on their tables. You know, you're keeping the Welsh economy ticking along. I mean, we've got a huge amount of public resource in Wales, over £6 billion a year. And unfortunately, we no longer have the national procurement framework, which did go some ways to helping lots and lots of small and medium and bigger businesses gain some really positive public spend procurement contracts. We no longer have that. So we're in a little bit of a strange place at the moment. So you've got things like the All Wales Procurement Alliance, you've got Sell to Wales. I found throughout the procurement project, there are a huge number of issues to Sell to Wales for people. You know, a lot of them haven't got the time that they need in order to dedicate to actually get on the site, then they change it. And so, you know, there are lots and lots of obstacles that could be quite easily cleared to make trading so much easier for SMEs. And I think that's the message to take forward, really, is that what we really want to see is a level playing field, so that not just a chosen few, but so that everybody can fairly participate in contracts that they can easily undertake. You know, we've got a huge wealth of incredibly skilled people in this area, and they just need the opportunity, they just need the chance. And like Nick has had with this subcontract opportunity, they just need to get that foot in the door. So it's a hugely positive story. Well done, Nick. Proud of you.
Thank you, Julie. And I think it's interesting, isn't it, that conversation about how major buyers can simplify the process. And we heard Peter talking about, you know, the opportunity to go in for an interview is often a really great way to favour, in a fair way, but favour a local supplier. And it was interesting what Nick was saying about slicing and dicing those lots down into smaller and smaller work packages, specialisms. So you've got specialist local firms that can do one little bit of a bigger job. Yeah, I think that sounds like an approach that we would like to see all buyers taking. Is like, can you break this down into smaller work packages, and can you think about how to simplify the tendering process, because every SME has a sort of tale of woe about the difficulty in grappling with these massive long bits of documentation, and all the more so frustrating when you're talking about frameworks where you're doing all that work to get on a framework with no guarantee of actually then receiving any work as a result of being on that call-off list. So Tom, I'd like to come to you for a few closing thoughts. We've heard from a number of small businesses. It's great to hear how proactive Pobble is, and I think really shining a light on the great stuff that Pobble is doing to really proactively engage with this issue and this problem. We heard there about the challenge of incumbents, and when a major buyer already has relationships with suppliers, be they local or not so local. Yeah, what are your thoughts about how major buyers need to refresh their processes, and yeah, what's your call to action for other major buyers in our area about what you'd like to see them doing?
So incumbents will have the upper hand. They'll know how the business works. They'll know what is expected of them. They'll know how the sort of the buy-in organisation is sort of looking at it. That said, you know, we undertake an open and fair, transparent process that sort of like gives everybody the opportunity. There's no sort of favouring any sort of questions or discussions around the contract or the tender, which is on the table, is undertaken in a open and transparent way in terms of the questions asked, and the responses are given to everybody who's bidding. So I think it's a case that we can try and sort of ensure that going forward that, you know, everything is open and transparent. And I suppose if there's anything which maybe potential bidders could learn from, is that once you've made the award and you've issued a letter to the unsuccessful, is to try and pack that letter as much as you possibly can with information about where their bid fell down, without disclosing sort of cost information. So under the ODU regulations, I'm obliged to give the unsuccessful bidder the score that they scored, the score of the winning bidder, and the reasoning to why they haven't scored that particular score. Some of those letters can be quite beastly and chunky, if I'm totally honest, which takes up a considerable amount of time. But I think that helps the unsuccessfuls to maybe pitch their bid the next time around. I think what I've seen a lot of in the past is where we've sort of undertaken tenders and people go off on a tangent and not answer the actual question. So we try to sort of engage with bidders. I've just done a legal services contract and held a couple of conversations with the legal providers who weren't successful to sort of show them where maybe their bid fell down. Some of them is cost, which obviously I can't disclose any sort of figures around sort of cost, but in terms of quality, where maybe they could pick up a few extra points, which maybe could be the chance of winning and losing a contract. I think also just on the social value stuff, social value is sometimes looked at or frowned upon in terms of it's asking for things, for argument's sake, painting a fence for a local church or something which is related to Pobble. We've actually changed tact on that now and actually sort of directed people to what we actually want from social value, which allows sort of bidders to see that and then hopefully be able to respond in a way that can achieve full marks on that question, because they've done it in the past. They've got apprentices. Apprentices is massive again now. I think 10 years ago it was apprentices was massive. Over the 10 years it sort of faded away, but it's on the sort of the tip of everyone's tongue. And again, I think using Sell to Wales is a great tool. We only use it as an advertising tool. We use eTender Wales for the tender, which is an electronic post box. Again, saves us all sitting around the table waiting for the bid to come in by the post and opening them. So I think, and there's lessons to be learned from both those sites. You know, I think Valley Wales, who were part of the Welsh Government, used to do training courses on Sell to Wales. I think all those training courses were funded and they've all gone. So yeah, I think, you know, I'm happy to sort of, I think people who've got my name or my number or my email, if you want to ask any questions about any processes, I'm happy to give any sort of feedback on that, what we look for as a group in Pobble, how we sort of score it. And just sort of hope, you know, we've obviously worked with ADS currently. We've worked with Murphy Shredded in the past. You know, I think it's a case that we try to keep it as local as we possibly can, keep the pound in Wales, and continue to sort of improve local suppliers' perception on tendering and winning more contracts.
Thank you, Tom. Great words to wrap up on there. We've talked about the importance of local firms gearing themselves up for tendering and all the things that the buyers can do to support that process. And we've talked about the importance of thinking about those smaller contracts as well, that don't necessarily need a full procurement and tendering process, but can really give smaller businesses a leg up and an opportunity to get their foot in the door for potential future opportunities as well. And we've talked about the importance of all of us looking in the mirror and saying, where am I buying my stuff from? It's easy to look at major organisations and public sector bodies and say they should buy more in Wales, they should buy more locally, but the same goes for all of us. And as Peter was explaining there, the kind of the snowball effect of all of our spending really makes a massive difference to the growth of smaller and indigenous local firms that we all want to see flourish and grow and develop and improve their delivery across our region and beyond. We've created an app as part of this process for listing your business as a small local supplier, and we're making sure that listing, that directory of small businesses, is regularly put in front of procurement officers and buyers in all the major organisations that you would expect, and that work will continue. So we'll share the link to the app. I think most of the guys in the room today are probably already on it, but if you're listening to this conversation and your business isn't already on the For the Region local sourcing app, then please do explore that. It's completely free to list your business, and it means that we can plug and promote what you do to the major buyers that we are lucky enough to connect with. I'm really passionate about this topic. So is Zoe, so is Julie. It's not something we're going to leave behind. It's not a battle that has been won, and there is lots more work to do. But it's great to hear from an organisation like Pobble, and we also heard about Coastal Housing doing the same. And we know that Swansea Council are committed to local sourcing as well, and it's great to hear about the good work that's happening and the sharing of the lessons and the expertise between those major buyers to support all of us and our smaller businesses in the area. I hope today has been useful to everyone. I've certainly picked up some handy hints and tips, and I hope others have the same. There's always more to talk about and more to say, but we'll leave it there for this afternoon. Thank you very much to all of our panelists for being here and sharing your wisdom and your insights and your success stories, as well as your frustrations with our audience this afternoon. Look up the app. Keep thinking about where your money is going, lead by example, and keep in touch with us at For the Region as we continue to lobby for better local sourcing by businesses large and small across Swansea and South West Wales. That's all for today. Thank you very much. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for being here. Thanks for your time,
everybody.
everyone.